I have to say it's really good to see that TNA did another good for them at least rating this week. The second straight week that they've had a pretty strong rating and had almost 1.5 million viewers for this past Thursday's Impact episode. So that's good. And I hope that's a sign of more positive things to come for this company in 2014. Now, I will say on the surface that I had a good time watching the show this week, and there's a lot that I did enjoy. Watching my review of the show this week, however, you might not come away with that conclusion. And the reason I say that is that as I was watching it, even though some of the faces are different and some of the things are different, it ultimately feels to me that TNA is ultimately going to end up doing the same thing. Now, I appreciate that TNA kicked right off with a wrestling match this week. And that's fine. There's a storyline reason to have Abyss versus Eric Young. However, this is something that TNA is notorious for, in my opinion, is taking a gimmick and running the damn thing into the ground. How many times do you have to give us a Monsters Ball match? If you continue to give us these same gimmick matches repeatedly, like month after month after month, they start to lose their impact, their significance, and their meaning and importance. And that's what it feels like when I see a Monsters Ball match. This should be like the big culmination of a feud, not just a randomly thrown out there match because you haven't had one this month. And then the whole way afterwards, when Eric Young unmasks Abyss, and he looks at the mirror and he realizes, Joseph Park does that, he's Abyss, and Abyss realizes he's Joseph Park. It's just like, it had a very, very TNA feeling to it, if you get what I mean. I can't lie, it was good to see Curry, man. I wanted to dance along with him, I really did. But then, of course, my joy was ultimately killed by that ultimate buzzkill in TNA, Bully Ray. And he ends up wiping out Curry, man, puts him in the coffin, and, then he starts going on about how he's gonna do shit to Mr. Anderson next week, and he's going to take out his family, and it just feels very Russo-esque to me, and it just feels very unnecessary. We haven't even seen Mr. Anderson's family on television. Why does this stupid Bully Ray character keep having to bring this garbage up? I mean, seriously. And not to mention the fact that it's Bully Ray getting television time still, and it's yet another match next week between Bully Ray and Mr. Anderson. I'm tired of seeing these guys wrestle. I'm tired of seeing these guys feud. Let's move the fuck on from them once and for all. Oh, he took my family from me. Now I'm going to take his family from him. You know what, Bully Ray? You should be thankful that he took away the aces and eights because they sucked, numbnuts. Austin Aries did what Austin Aries, I feel, does, and that's come out and have an entertaining segment on a show. And he cuts a promo talking about how he was the one that created Option C, and he did it once before, and now that he's X Division champion, this is his path back to becoming TNA World Champion once again, and he's going to use Option C again. And that's all fine and good. But then TNA, for some reason, decides to have the bromance come out to distract him so Zema Ion could come out and try and cash in his X Division title shot. And it's like, well, this is kind of out of nowhere. This has a very WWE Money in the Bank feel. I hope that's not what they were going for here. And they do all of this just to have Zema Ion lose. It just really felt like after Austin Aries' promo, which was fine, I have no problem with, I thought it was good, they just threw this in there, and I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? It just seemed really pointless and unnecessary to me. Why have Zema Ion get one of those briefcases just to have him do this here and now? Two things that I really appreciated on this week's show. I do have to call these out now. Number one, TNA bothered to explain why Christy Hemme wouldn't be freaked out by Samuel Shaw, because apparently she did see the video footage, and she does actually watch this show. And she saw Samuel Shaw's big, creepy serial killer shrine to her. And she says, you're a nice guy, but we need to keep it professional. It's like, you addressed it. That's something the old TNA would have never even have bothered. That I appreciated a lot, and I wanted to make sure I did point that out here. And the other thing I did appreciate was Chris Sabin and his proposal to Velvet Sky. This was set up so well. And when I saw it at first and he was talking about it was a special place and it was going to be a special moment, I'm like, where's this asshole going with this? I love heel Sabin so much more than boring ass Motor City Machine Gun babyface Sabin. You know, if this was the type of Chris Sabin that all of us were supposed to be nut hugging, then I'm all for that. I understand now that probably Fool Killer will be incredibly enraged and upset about this. Well, too damn bad. Now Sabin's actually developing a personality and a character and makes him much more appealing to me to watch. He sat there and he said, I'm going to wrestle Velvet Sky next week. Let the pigeons loose, bitches. So one of the featured matches on this show was Magnus versus Kurt Angle in a non-title match. And, you know, I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, they're doing it again. They just really are going out of their way to make Magnus feel like a weak-ass paper champion. And I don't know how long you should be barking up that tree. At some point in time, in order to generate heat on this guy, like real legitimate stick-with-you heat, not the type that comes from him being over there in Glasgow, you know, in front of a real, actual wrestling crowd, and a big wrestling crowd at that. It's just, why are you going to go to such great lengths to make this guy seem like he's a loser? I get part of that, but it seems like they're going overboard with this. Like, I understand you've got Kurt Angle is beat up and, you know, he's injured, and as a result, you're needing to write him off of television. That's fine. Well, why can't Magnus beat him clean here and then have EC3 and Magnus beat the ever-loving piss out of him? Why does EC3 have to interfere in the match to beat the piss out of him so Angle still gets the fucking victory via DQ? I mean, come on, man. Can't Magnus get the victory first clean against a clearly beaten up Kurt Angle and then EC3 and Magnus double team him? I did appreciate the fact that TNA said, you know what, most fans understand that when they see this, that means there's a real injury, so we're going to pull that out here with Kurt Angle. That was very well done. It made it feel like a significant thing. It made it feel like there was an actual consequence to the action. It made it feel like Kurt Angle was really, truly, legitimately hurt. But all the while, like I said, why couldn't your world champion beat this guy clean here? I really appreciate how TNA seems to be rediscovering Samoa Joe, and they are really trying to build a monster here, and they are really trying to build him back up the best they can after so many years of really screwing the pooch with this guy and treating him like shit. You know, whether that be because so many people have left now they don't have a choice, I don't care. The bottom line is they are turning Samoa Joe into this awesome hero, kick-ass, beat-your-ass, submission-forcing killing machine. And I'm digging it, and I love it. Him versus Bobby Roode, a #1 contenders match. And he beats Bobby Roode. He makes him tap. Again, establishing his finisher. He already made Magnus tap. Now he's made Bobby Roode tap. Makes you think that heading on further down the road, maybe going into, let's say, lockdown, that Samoa Joe actually has a real legitimate chance of beating Magnus to become the next TNA World Heavyweight Champion. I love this. I love this match. I love the way that, again, this week, TNA seems to be doing a lot of good things with Samoa Joe and just making him this unstoppable type of monster that doesn't fear any fucking buddy. I love it. So that feels different because it's been so long since TNA's been on that track, and that's a good thing that they're doing it now. Better late than never is what I have to say about it. However, when I talk about things being different, then yet the same, instead of putting all the emphasis on Samoa Joe and building him up as a monster and having that be the way the show ends, TNA, of course, figures that something else is much more important than your #1 contender or your world champion. After 11 plus years of watching this freaking company, it just wouldn't feel right ultimately, I guess, if the show wasn't devoted primarily to the storyline between a former WWE individual and somebody with TNA that doesn't deserve nearly the camera time that they're getting in some type of epic, even though we just saw it a few months ago, and a few months before that, and a few months before that, and a few months before that, and a few months before that power struggle. You know, I mean, this whole shit with MVP and Dixie Carter. You know, early on in the night, MVP comes out and cuts a promo. Good promo. I thought MVP was on point here. It was good. Rockstar Spud inviting him back to meet with Dixie Carter. They go back. They have another segment where they're in this room, and like I said, that overhead pipe. I said it on Twitter. At Off the Rope Show's the Twitter handle, by the way, for this show. Make sure you follow it. I said that overhead pipe really classes up the joint and really makes it look major league, doesn't it? Not to mention that limo caravan that he arrived in. Oh man, you want to talk about major leagues? Seriously, ugh. But then after a segment at the beginning of the show, a segment in the middle of the show, now they're out here for the main event. Like this is the most important thing going on in the company. How many times do we have to have these fucking power struggle storylines in TNA? I'm going to keep hammering on. Now, faces may change, and you might try to do some different stuff, but ultimately it seems like you fundamentally come back to the same damn thing. It's like last week you had a little bit of a ratings pop because MVP was there. So now you're going to cram them down our throats even more this week. And maybe in the short term that'll work. But long term, you have to put the focus on the people in the ring, for crying out loud. As far as Dixie Carter goes, getting all this television time, it would be one thing if they were packaging her as a Vicky Guerrero type or a Johnny Ace type. But she doesn't give you that same type of feeling as a character. It doesn't feel like they're trying to package her that way. It doesn't feel like they're trying to make her a parody or they're trying to rib her. They're trying to make her feel like legitimate. And I'm not buying it. And it just seems ridiculous. It would go over much better, I think, if they tried to make her a Vicky Guerrero type of caricature of Dixie Carter or a Johnny Ace type of caricature of Dixie Carter. Instead, they're actually having her be Dixie Carter, and her lack of acting skills and her still, less than 100% comfort level in front of the television cameras and in front of big live audiences like they had in Glasgow this week. It just makes it seem like, oh man, when's this gonna end? This whole thing, like MVP said when he had made the match between Magnus and Kurt Angle, said I had to go to the board. What board? I thought TNA was a privately held company. I understand you can have somebody technically be an investor in a company, even if it's privately held, because they could have a minority ownership stake or whatever, but since when a board? I could see if you said the network wanted it. I get that. But you're talking about a board? That makes no sense. Why would a privately held company have a board of directors? I'm just wondering. Maybe I'm a little off base here. I don't know. But again, it's just, like I said, it all comes down to no matter how much stuff has changed or needs to change, it seems like TNA cannot help themselves but falling into the same ruts of doing the same damn things. And they did the same thing here. MVP's talking about things are going to change and all this crap. I don't see it. And I have no faith that the storyline is ultimately going to pan out and be anything good. Why? Because just like WWE, TNA in recent years has given me absolutely no reason to have faith in waiting for the story to play out and see what will ultimately happen. Because I can pretty much assume, based off of history, that it's going to suck. So even though this was a good show this week, and even though I was entertained, in the back of my mind, I was thinking all throughout the night as I saw these different things that, even though a lot of people think it's different, it ultimately, to me, kind of feels like it's just going to be the same old TNA again in 2014. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.